God bless all of you today. We're grateful for another opportunity to come with another clergy conversation. And today, I'm happy to have one of God's best preachers, pastors, teachers, and leaders, especially on leadership, and one who I've admired from afar and have gotten a chance to know and have a good relationship with, the proud pastor of the Bethlehem Star Baptist Church in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Pastor Rodney Payne is with us today.
What's up, man?
So
Big
Pastor
time.
Payne,
Big
thank
time.
you.
Big time. Big time.
You know, we're not going to start this today.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
No, you're the big time. You're the big time, not me. Not me.
Exactly. That's what I'm
Payne,
saying.
thank you so much for coming and being a part of this today. Very much appreciated.
All right, man. Glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yes, sir. So just as we open this up, just tell us a little bit about your background.
Wow. I probably start with family, man. I'm a husband of one wife for 32 plus years.
Yes, sir.
We've got two wonderful daughters and two sons-in-law, and I've got three beautiful grandchildren. So that's kind of what God uses as my why. I am a Spencer boy, born and bred, grew up in the loving St. James Baptist Church under Reverend Pastor W.B. Parker, my father's ministry. That's where it all began for me. Both of my grandfathers were deacons. My grandmothers were deaconess.
Okay.
My aunties and uncles singing and did in the choir and did all the work. So that's kind of where the roots come from. I've been the senior pastor at Bethlehem Star for 14 years and did 3 years as the assistant to Pastor Coates, who preceded me for 31 years as a pastor there. So longevity is in those who've led me and grown me in ministry as a part of the process.
Yes. So when you talk to us about just how the church culture was growing up in Spencer, Oklahoma, because for those who don't know, Oklahoma City has a strong church culture, but so does Spencer, Oklahoma. So how was the church culture, the church climate growing up at Loving St. James?
Well, all the churches were sisters, so there was no competition among churches. We weren't trying to proselyte. Matter of fact, you couldn't go to another church in the community without an explanation for why you left the last one and a letter to support your movement. Church was, as a kid, my grandmother played the piano for Sunday school. So I would go to the end of brotherhood, then Sunday school, then church, then 3 o'clock service, then back at church at 5:30 for BTU. Don't matter where you went at 3 o'clock, you got to be back at BTU. Then night service at 6:30. We had our youth meetings, and a royal ambassador, I will do my best to become a well-informed, responsible follower of Christ. and that was on Wednesday. That's what it was. We had choir practice on Thursdays. As you grow up, you go to men's course on Saturday. And so church was what we did. So we worked our life around church, not church around our life.
Right.
I mean, we didn't play none of my sports teams. We didn't practice on Wednesday. We didn't have games on when we shouldn't think about having games on Sunday. That was out of the question altogether. So it was the community. It was the hub. It was where we went.
So how was it growing up under the leadership of Pastor Parker? Just like from his preaching, his teaching, just him as a pastor, what were things that you gained from just watching him?
As a child, as a preacher?
We're going to start with as a child, then we're going to move to preaching.
Well, I'll give you one as a child. I didn't want to be at church one Wednesday night. Kids, we don't always want to be there. And back in those days, you don't want to be at church. I may have not, maybe I said I wasn't feeling well. Maybe I alluded to that I wasn't feeling real well. So they took me to Pastor Parker's office. And when I got in Pastor Parker's office, he said, well, the Lord heals us. And he went and got his oil and put his oil on hand and prayed for me and made me well enough to go back to class now. so it was very, he believed in integrity, and he would say things that others wouldn't say. He believed in community. He would make sure that our marginalized citizens had representation. He was a man who fought for his community. Clara Lupa, W.K. Jackson, those were his running buddies. So we knew about having opportunity. He wanted us to have, we had the Menace Lakeview Center. We called it the center, where we went and played basketball. He wanted his kids to have their own gyms. We went up and measured the floor at Menace Lakeview and then built a gym for us at the church. And then we became the hub for basketball leagues and things in the community. He would just do that. That's who he was. He believed in that. We had people who were into theater and acting. So we built a building, we put a stage on it in the building and put the real curtains and drapes. And then we did the play Pearly Victorious as a result of, because he saw a way to meet needs and to pull the best out of people. That's who he was.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that right there is amazing. Just especially when you talk about a stage and those who are involved in theater, acting, and basketball, especially in that time. And just I think that's something that is important and kind of really setting a trend setting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, no, he brought bond programs and building out that way. And I mean, he built everything, and everything he did was in love. So if somebody came to church and had a need, we met the need. He would often get up and say, "We've got a need today, and I need you all to give. I'm not letting this woman go home and not be able to feed her children today." That was just a regular deal.
So from your experience, just watching that as a pastor now, how would you say are keys to not just being involved in community, but when you're putting these projects out, when you are putting this vision out, getting people not just to see it, but also getting people to follow it?
It's natural for me in that how God is called. I'm probably more of what you would call an equipping pastor.
Mm-hmm.
But growing up under Pastor Parker and then Pastor Coates, those two men were marked by God with two distinct things. Pastor Parker was marked with love. Yes, everything he did was love. That's why the church is called the Loving St. James Baptist Church.
Yes, sir.
Whereas Pastor Coates is all about humility. He is the most humble man I've ever met in my life. I mean, he just is. He's humility personified. So when you take those and then you take what God has made me to be, my desire is not just to provide it for you, although I want to do that. We're going to be providing meals for families on tomorrow here in the city. But I want to equip you and teach you how to get there and let you know it's possible. And I believe in empowerment and showing you the way. And so while some may go out in the front lines and fight the injustices, I'm going to be in the kitchen fighting preparation. Mm-hmm. People don't have knowledge. So that's kind of where I come in. But it's our responsibility. I am my brother's keeper. You can't tell people about a Jesus that they can't see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So then talk to us about when you felt the call of ministry on your life.
There's some debate about this, sir. There's a story with this thing, right? And the story is this. I have a cousin who tells me I told him I would preach when I was 13.
Okay.
I have no recollection of that. I will deny that I know anything about that at all. But when I got married on a Tuesday night. That Sunday, I rededicated my life to Christ.
Okay.
And at that point, you kind of start dealing with stuff, but I'm not ready yet. I got married in 1990. I started preaching in 96.
Okay.
And so I'm one of 4 first cousins on my mother's side who preach.
Okay. And
so when it got a little further, I got a little more engaged. Where I messed up was I joined the male course of the Loving St. James Baptist Church. And my uncle Cornelius Anderson, the president. And back in those days, we would sing every Sunday somewhere. So that means we go to church all day, then go 3 o'clock, go sing, then go back to church. And that commitment is what kind of connected me. And then as I go through this process, I already got 2 cousins preaching. I'm the third of the 4. I got 2 of them preaching. Well, Pastor Parker calls me to be a deacon. And listen, when I tell you, I became a deacon, I was relieved. I was like, phew, it's not preaching, it's serving. It's high. I don't want to do it, but man, okay, it's not preaching. I lasted 2 years and I had to give it up. God would not let me rest. He would not let me. I got to where I couldn't sleep at night. And I tried my best to disqualify myself because I know I'm not good enough to preach. And I know me. Some people think that I know me. But after that time, I couldn't let it go. Scared to death. I was scared to preach, but I was more scared not to because I knew what God said.
And so now there are those who have that same feeling of where they may say, am I led to this? Or they may say, am I qualified for this? Or they may just look at themselves and say, no, this can't be me. But what would you tell those who may be having some self-doubt or some self-questions of whether or not they feel that they are really called to the ministry?
Wait until you're sure, but you will run out of runway. You'll run out of track. The Lord will back you into a corner where you will know for yourself and won't nobody be able to change your mind. You don't care how you can run, but you can't hide. I'd rather you wait a little too long than to go too soon. And so for me, it wasn't anything anybody said to me. I sought counsel, I got help, I had a good pastor, I had all those components. But in 1996 on election day, God and I had a conversation. We had been wrestling for 3 days. And I came out of the back door of my office at work to go and vote. And as I walked out, I said, okay, fine, Lord, I'll do it. I felt a 1,000,000-pound elephant get off my back, and I was free. So I believe that God knows, he knows what he's doing, and he's going to advise you. He's going to let you know, and it will soon be where grandmama can't call you. So don't go because your grandma said, I knew you was a preacher or a pastor. I see ministry in that boy. Ministry, particularly in the African-American community, ministry doesn't mean preaching. Mm-hmm. You can serve God without preaching. Mm-hmm. And so wait until you're sure. And I believe that God will make it very, very plain and clear. And he made it extremely plain and clear to me. And I still tried to run for a minute.
So what was your first sermon?
It's time to recognize Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. Jesus led up in the wilderness to be tempted of the devil 40 days after it was hungry. Something like that. Something like that.
It's time to recognize. So I'm gonna have to take that title, just FYI.
Well, just take it, because what happened is he tempts him with bread.
Yep.
He tempts him with his power, and he tempts him with stuff.
Right. Absolutely.
And finally, Jesus said, "Look here, get on out of here, Satan. Go on. That's the Rodney Payne paraphrase. Get away from me." But yeah, that was 26 years ago.
Okay. And so after that first sermon, were there other opportunities that opened up for you?
Okay, now I grew up. Now you a new school preacher. We let y'all speak all the time. Back in the old days, I need somebody. Call your pop in a minute. He'll tell you what you did was you came, and if you were lucky, you got to greet the folk from the pulpit, or read a scripture, or perhaps pray a prayer. Now I grew up in a very fortunate environment where Pastor Parker would allow us to preach young ministers every third Sunday.
Okay.
The problem is it was 12 of us.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So you wait your turn, and then, say, for instance, one of the older sons comes home for the weekend, or you just got bumped. And so you might, or you got to preach at night. So no, yes, opportunities opened up for me in ministry, but it wasn't anything like today. Oh no, we had no right to preach. It was a privilege and an opportunity, and you guarded it with your life. If you were on the program to pray a prayer or read a scripture at a funeral, my pastor told me, son, read the program, do what they ask you to do, and sit down. Understand, the Lord will not lead you to do anything else. Do what you're supposed to do. That's how I grew up. So yeah, I ended up getting opportunities to preach here and there. But again, even then, you calling me to preach and inviting me to preach didn't mean I could preach. It meant I went to Pastor Parker and said, Pastor Parker, matter of fact, the letter should have gone to him. So if it came to me first, I'm supposed to send you back and tell you, send that to him, not email. Write that letter out and then mail it to him, and then he will decide if I'll be there or not.
Now I will say this, I definitely have heard that from a lot of people that, back in the day when, I would say 20, 30 years, when associates were invited, that before they could even accept, they had to run it by their pastor, their father in the ministry.
It wasn't run it by, it was get it approved.
Wasn't even run it by, it was get it approved.
Man, listen, I at this point, I go to Bethlehem Star. I'm there. I'm the assistant pastor. Mm-hmm. I'm an associate minister. Mm-hmm. Someone invites me to preach. Pastor Coates says, yes, you can go. Someone else invites me to preach. He says, no, you can't. And he didn't say why. He said, no.
Yes, sir.
So you go back mad to your office or to your space and be pouting and have your lips stuck out, but you don't go.
Yes, sir.
You tell somebody they can't go somewhere, now they'll leave your church and go find a pastor who will let them go. I'm just telling the truth, sir.
But it's funny you bring that up, because as young preacher, I know with my generation, we like to go preach, but if our pastor told us that we couldn't go, then I know for us that would ruffle some feathers, that would make us feel a certain way. But when you were told that you couldn't go, or said like, no, you can't go, what how did that not only make you feel, but looking back on it now, what made you appreciate it?
Oh, at the time, attitude to the hills. I was mad. I get preached. That's what I do. I'm a preacher. All that stuff. That pride and arrogance and foolishness. That's all that was. Looking back, what I know is that if you cannot follow discipline, you cannot lead people. And so I wouldn't be the pastor I am had I not submitted to authority. You got to submit to authority. And my pastor's the authority. And he doesn't have to tell me why I can't go somewhere and preach. He can just tell me I can't go. And I got folk now who give me a courtesy text. I wish I had a witness here that I'm not going to be. We forget about preaching, Pastor. Let's just talk. You gave an account if you weren't going to be at church.
Yes, sir.
If you weren't going to be at Bible study, you didn't just go do what you want to do and come to church as a courtesy. That's not how it was then. No. You got approval. You did as assigned. You followed instruction. You followed leadership. You submitted yourself to authority. And it made me a better preacher.
Yes, sir.
It made me more studied, more well-studied. It made me more appreciative of opportunities. At the time, it frustrated me. It made me mad. Because I want to do what I want to do. You ain't my daddy, but you are.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so before we get to Pastor Coates, when you were starting in ministry, preaching ministry under Dr. Parker, what were some keys that you learned from Dr. Parker that helped you along the way?
Remember, I stated earlier, I have 2 cousins that were preaching before me, and they started under Pastor Parker. Both of my grandmothers and a host of aunties and uncles. Grandfathers, both deacons. So I had a different kind of pressure.
Yes, sir.
So here's what my grandmother said to me that certainly she'd have said to you, because I know how you preach. She said, boy, that pulpit ain't made for all that gyrating. Say something. That's what she said to me. So Pastor Parker would take us down. Now, I don't know if you know this about Pastor Parker, but Pastor Parker is an educator by trade.
Okay.
So he would literally sit us down and write an entire sermon and show us how to write, how to study, how to get it, and go through the entire manuscript and the outline for the manuscript and taught us how to do it. And hearing him every Sunday, he was very easy to follow. I knew, that we're transitioning from A to B. We're transitioning from B to C. And so that was the discipline and the diligence. But Pastor Parker was all about your lifestyle. Show out if you want to. You'll be in front of the church confessing your sins. And so he was really about lifestyle and preparation. And then I had the privilege of having one cousin that's younger than me in age, but older than me in preaching, and another who is the OG of our preaching family. And they taught me how to study the Bible and the discipline and commitment required to preach. So I had a village help me, but Pastor Parker was just, the less he said to you, the better. Because if he talked to you about your sermon, or he repreached your sermon when you got through, that meant you messed up. And he would limit your time. So he was very, very, I'm telling you, he's the most loving man I've ever met. He just loves people. But he would prepare us and give us an opportunity. And so I wouldn't be what I am anywhere that I am without him.
But I like what you just said of what Dr. Parker would do. You said he would sit you all down and write out a manuscript
on a chalkboard.
On a chalkboard.
With chalk. He'd sit down and start with a blank chalkboard and write out an entire sermon that he had put together on a legal pad.
Wow.
Yeah, we wasn't doing all this stuff. This wasn't a part of our life. Yeah, I'm sitting at my desk in my office at my home, and I have this many Bibles in my hand, and I have hundreds of illustrations, and I still got paper right there. but I do use the computer though. I do use the computer.
But that's amazing to me that you said on chalk and writing out this whole manuscript and showing and going through the steps. Because in your opinion, does with the generation of preaching now compared to the generation you started under, what do you think is the difference in, as you say, the scholarship or the discipline of preaching?
Well, if you under me, bless your heart, you get what I got. right? So we're going to go through and break down text, and I provide notes for my congregants. So that's how I'm wired. I think that we have gotten more. Preaching in general has always been somewhat theatrical, but the theatrics of culture dictate our celebration, right? But as far as preparation and planning and preparing for preaching, it really depends on who you connect with. Because if we can say it and it sounds good, we'll go for it. But I'm an equipping pastor, so I don't want to preach anything to you that you can't go out and manifest in your own life. And so I'm really careful to help you to get there. That's always my goal and my intent. So that's how I prepare preachers. I'm not concerned about whether you hoop or shout or whatever. That's fine. All that's good. Just say something and give the people something they can follow. And I don't care if you're a manuscript. If you're not a manuscript preacher and you're an outline preacher, you need to be good enough to be an outline preacher. You can't get up here and just make up stuff. So I teach concepts and content from that perspective. So I have a bit of teacher in me in that process, but it just depends. If you just listen, you can tell people to get up, and it's more about the hook. It's more about the title. It's like we can't tell you the words of a song, but we know the chorus, right? And we know the chorus because it rings out and it resonates. I'm going to live debt free for the rest of my life. Well, you that could be very true. However, if you're not going to count your money, you're going to have some debt. So that's a practical concept that's biblical. Oh, no man, nothing but to love him. So I think it's it's what environment you're into and what attracts you. Sometimes we do things for shock and awe, but they leave you without substance.
So then what is your sermon process?
You got me looking around. So when my sermons, the last part of so God gives me as a pastor, you want to go back to a preacher. As a pastor, what God does is he gives me an annual theme. He gives it to me, and then he gives me how it lays out, and then I begin to go do research to apply to it. So my first step is, once I identify the passage of scripture that is going with the line of thought. I don't have a sermon title, but I do have a thought line.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to read that scripture probably 10 different times, 10 different versions, and just read it. Before I pick up any concordance or anything like that, I'm going to write the scripture by hand.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to highlight what I want to know about it, and then I'm going to talk about what each verse, keeping the text in context, speaks to me before I start. That's where I start. And so once I go through all that, then I go and I look at 2, 3, 4 commentaries, and I even switch those up just to not keep them the same. And then the thing that I find that is in all 3 or 4, that's going to be closest to the truth. I'm a word guy, so I'm going to go back to the original Hebrew, Chaldea, Greek to see what that word says and think about culture, time, context, and application, and then try to get the text will tell me what the title is. The title comes after the text.
Right.
After the preparation, actually. Usually the sermon is done. Then I'm like, okay, this is where we're going. Then we can title it.
And so then after the title, then how do you go, from when you look at your text from that point, that study, then you got the text, and now you're making your notes, you're making your notations. How do you make those transitions within that passage?
I find out what it's saying to me. So say I'm typically going to preach one verse, but I'm going to preach it from the 15 before or 15 after, and I'm going to highlight those. So I'm going to go, what are the 3 main ideas through these 15 verses I'm looking at?
Yes, sir.
I'll put them in 3 buckets. That's my 1, that's my 2, that's my 3. Then how do I expose what's in this one place? And I'm going to reference the text, and that's my A and my B. Then I'm going to do my 1, 2 below the A and the B to get a little bit deeper. And if I do any more than that, I'll preach 3 hours. So I'm stopping.
Do you have a specific time limit?
Yeah, no. So Lord, my members are. let me say it this way. I have 2 services, Pastor. So 8 o'clock service. I have 8 o'clock service, 9:15 fulfillment hour Sunday school, then a 10:45 service. So I tell my folk at church when you say this, you probably be careful you don't lie. Technically, I'm supposed to be finished by 9:05 ish to get to my 9:15 service. That works sometimes. It does. So I give myself markers to know how long I've been up.
Okay.
But if someone invites me to preach, it's 35 minutes or less.
Okay.
If I come preach for you, I'm not going to preach all day. I don't do that. Whenever I go anywhere, I want to get invited back. So I don't. But
Right.
my job, if I'm coming to you, is to preach and inspire your people. My job at my house is to pastor people.
Absolutely.
And so whatever God says, what we're gonna do. So I would say I don't count celebrations. Celebrations don't count. And sometimes I pre-celebrate. So sometimes I shout before we start preaching. Then we settle down, then preach. So it just depends. I'm probably a 40.
I've seen that from some of the live services that take place at Bethlehem Star.
I can't shut God down, so I can say what I gotta say.
Absolutely.
God, stop moving real quick so I can go ahead and get. No, I'm gonna just have to go on and ride this thing out.
And are you preaching the same sermon in both services?
I am.
Okay.
The same content. It ain't the same sermon. Not because I changed it. It's just God does what God does in the service.
Absolutely. And so let me go back. As you are as associate, as you're talking about with Dr. Parker, and then you transition to being under Dr. Coates at Bethlehem Star. So how was that transition? You know, how was that going from basically your home church and now you're going to Bethlehem Star?
What I would say is ministry is a life of learning.
Yes, sir.
If I had it to do over again with the wisdom I have today, I would do it differently. Now, it looked right. Everything looked right and all of that, but I wasn't mature enough to understand how to transition. I'd never done it before.
Yes, sir.
And so actually, I had a stop between the two, but it was only a 12-month stop. But the thing is that I knew in my heart God said to go. Just because you know what you know God is saying, He puts people over you, and there's a way to handle that. And so I would have done it differently. They were different, but everything that I needed before I could ever pastor a church, between the transitions, God gave them to me.
Yes, sir.
And with each move, I had to hear God more clearly. See, when you're a senior pastor, you have to hear God.
Absolutely.
And so you got to go to school on that. And there's no book that can teach you how to hear from God. You got to understand how He speaks to you. So I learned a lot in those processes. Both of those pastors in particular have been very, very instrumental in everything that I've learned and grown. And so when I got to Bethlehem Star, I had what they needed as a church at the time, and they had what I needed as a preacher, and my family needed. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that they were going to give me what I needed. I was just going because I know for sure that God told me to go there. So when I went there, and people think that Pastor Coates set me up to be the next pastor. Well, see, what had happened was Pastor Coates said, and I quote, you can come here, you'll be an associate minister, and you'll get to preach sometime. We'll see what God does. That's what he said. Now, me, I know I'm called to be a pastor. Tell me nothing. Whatever. And so I did 3 things when I got there: preach, teach, and love.
Yes, sir.
And that's what I did. And through that, God grew us and put us together. And so my life of ministry, because I've always been able to follow a good leader.
Yes, sir.
I'm not good at all at following a poor leader. I'm not good at that. But if you're a good leader, I'm not going to usurp authority. I'm not going to do my own thing. I'll grit my teeth and be mad because I want to do something different, but I follow. And so in my following, I learned more humility than I'd ever learned. And when I learned that lesson, the value of the love that I've been taught from Pastor Parker my whole life, not just my father in the ministry.
Yes, sir.
He baptized me when I was 5.
Yes, sir.
And all that you begin to see more clearly. So transitions are difficult. They were very difficult on my family.
Yes, sir.
His family don't want to go, and they like what they like, and they know what they know, and they didn't know I didn't like it either. It wasn't for me to like. I was on assignment. So, but God knew in His divine plan, that was where He had me to go, and how it ended up working. So it just transitions. You have to have someone to help you through that transition. And what I learned most, and by God's grace, we're able to do this, is you always honor your leader.
Yes, sir.
So to this day, Pastor Parker, by God's grace, he's 101, 102 in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
Pastor Coates, 85 years old, and he got a standing ovation this past Sunday at church.
Right.
So I learned that, and so there were some painful lessons, there were some growing processes, but the transitions were I would have done it today. I would do it differently because I know better.
Well, I think you're helping. I know you're helping, especially when you talk about transition, because there does come that point where you do have to make some transitions in life. But as you said, you have to be careful how you do it, because there's a right way and there is that wrong way of making that transition. And even as you talk about with family, there are pastors who do have to make those transitions, and it can be hard on the family, but still having to lead the family while you're making this transition.
That's right. And one of the biggest things I've learned is that when God calls you or moves you, he does move your family.
Yes, sir.
But he doesn't remove compassion from you. They get to have their feelings. They get to be upset. They get to hurt. They get to cry. And as the leader, you get to be compassionate and understand that and give them some space.
Yes, sir.
And give them some conversation and things of that nature. But I want, for me, what I would say to a preacher who is in transition, humble yourself, ask God, talk to your leader. And if you're leaving mad, get your heart right. And if you left meat on the bone, meaning that you know what God sent you to a place to do, and you have not done it, hush your mouth and go back and do your job. God's not going to move you and deliver you from something when you haven't done what you were sent there to do.
Wow. Now that's heavy right there. Let me just that's heavy right there. And so now, how you said you served 3 years under Dr. Coates? Okay. And so for those who don't know, Dr. James C. Coates as well as Dr. W.B. Parker have been pillar pastors within the Oklahoma City, the Oklahoma City area. Strong leaders. And so serving under Dr. Coates, as you talked about, honoring him, learning these lessons, and as you then transitioned to being the senior pastor, but what were those keys that you just watched from Dr. Coates in those few years that helped you when it was your time to take over as pastor at Bethlehem Star?
I don't know if it helped me or hurt me, because here's the thing. Both of them had reached the highest level of leadership.
Yes, sir.
So people did things because they said to.
Yes, sir.
Without question. It was because they said so. Well, when you're the new kid on the block, you're wet behind the ears. You can't tell me what to do. You can't change this. So, but what I learned without a doubt is from Pastor Parker, always love. Always love. And then from Pastor Coates, always be humble.
Yes,
no
sir.
matter what. And the one thing that they both had in common was evangelism, outreach, sharing the good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ were core to their ministries. So at no point was either ministry ever in a position where they were never just a meeting church. They were both outreach churches that would go and witnessing is what we call it, and sharing the good news. That has been so outreach. So when you see us doing events, Pastor Parker had a great cloud of witnesses. Pastor Coates had Thanksgiving, Christmas basket giveaways. I mean, they've always served and been outreaching and sharing the good news. And so Praise Beyond the Walls is a product of that mentality of we must share the gospel and we must meet needs.
And I'm glad you went on there, because like I said, Pastor Payne is doing a fantastic job at Bethlehem Star. That's what I said. I've admired him from afar, just his creativity and things he does. And especially with Praise Beyond the Walls, which is one of the highlight events, one of the highlight church events in our city. We have a lot of them, but Praise Beyond the Walls is something that's very keen and very well attended. So how did that come about, and just talk about, the creativity of it. How did that really just start?
Well, as pastors, we get way too much credit for good stuff and way too much blame for bad stuff. It was an idea. One of our team members had a thought. I had a thought. Somebody else had a thought. So I can remember some of the people in the room: Deacon Joseph Smith in the room, Deacon Michael Glover in the room, others in the room. There's a lot of people in the room, and so our initial goal was to do something outside of the church. That became a praise situation. Okay, great. Now we got to rent a tent. And you probably don't know this, but I'm a banker by trade. I did 25 years in corporate American banking and finance.
Okay.
So when I got to rent a tent is not cheap. So there's no way I'm gonna use a tent one day. We're not renting a tent. It costs too much. I got permits. It don't make any sense. That's not good. That's not fiduciarily responsible. So we began to expand it and figure out what can we do on this day, what can we do on that day. And so ideas began to come from everywhere. Now the ideas far exceeded our revenue. We didn't have the money to do it, but I can remember specifically Deacon Michael Glover says, listen, Pastor, if God said to do this, he's going to provide, and we ought to plan accordingly. And we've never had a problem again. We get concerned. Sometimes God doesn't live when we think, but we over the years, matter of fact, in 2024, it will be our 10-year anniversary of Praise Beyond the Walls. So it happened with the room, the leaders in the room. They began to put it together, build teams. And God has brought new members on the team as time has gone. Some has rolled off, some have rolled on. And so now as a leader, I leverage the people in the room with their ideas, their specific. I'm a gift pastor. I believe in working in your lane, work where you're gifted. So some are very good at organizing. Some are very good at structure and back end things. Some are good at, what. And so we do that. And by the time you get your permits for the city and the food you're going to feed, no, it's a lot to do. But the people, it's a team effort. And so that's how you get something that big. And that with that vision is God will give you a global vision, and he'll give you people. And those people that he gives you, they're not to replicate what you think, but they're to extend by their own thinking and gifting to say under the same vision that God has given. And that's how it manifests.
Well, it's been a blessing. That has definitely been a blessing to the city. I've seen it, and so it's been a blessing to the city. But there's something I want to ask you that I think will help other pastors as well. When you are taking over, as you said, for a legend.
Absolutely.
Because there are a lot of guys who will take over for a legend at a church, and they may hear, well, he did it this way, and then that may get in their psyche and say, well, if I do it this, sometimes we in churches, the comparison game can rear its ugly head. And sometimes if the pastor is not careful, the pastor can start playing a big part in that comparison game, but trying to, and not just comparison with the legend, but compare to other churches, other pastors as well. But from, like I said, but you are one of those who took over for a legend. Let's just call it what it is. For a legend with Dr. Coates. But at the same time, you have to plant your own seeds. You have to do your own thing. But how was that? And what advice would you give to those about who are in that space of taking over for a legend, about honoring the legend, but still being you at the same time?
So I had the euphoria of transitions. This is as good as it gets. I was joined the church in October of 2005. I was appointed assistant pastor in January of 2006. I served 2006, 7, and 8 as the assistant pastor, then took over in 2009. So in the first several years of ministry there, what I did, and this is what I tell all the people that I coach and everything else, is before you change a ministry, you ought to assimilate to a ministry. So assimilation was big. How we do things here. I didn't ask how do we do it? Learn the people, get to know the people. That was the first thing I did. And I told you I did 3 things. I preach, teach, I love. That's all I didn't try to run anything. I wasn't trying to lead anything. I wasn't trying to pastor anything. I wasn't doing that. So when I became the pastor, God gave me a vision. God's not going to make you a pastor and not give you a vision. If you don't have a vision and you say you call a pastor, go back to your prayer closet and read and hit rewind, talk to God again. He's going to give you a vision. And not everybody's going to agree with your vision. Not everybody's going to like your vision. And so what I did was God gave me what I believe I was supposed to have. And for me, it's develop leaders and excel in 3 areas in ministry: live in the love of God, walk in the will of God, and experience the power of God. If you do it in this church, it's got to be done in love. If you do it in this church, it's got to be done according to the word. If you do those 2 things, God will show up. And so that's how I did that. But you have to be mindful to a new pastor coming into a place. Anything you stop doing, it was somebody else's vision from God, somebody else's passion, somebody else's, God laid this on their heart. So you never discredit what was behind you. Always honor it, because you would, however bad you may think it is, The church was still standing when you got there because of some of those people and those processes. That doesn't mean everything is right that was done before, but just remember, you're not going to do everything right either. So that doesn't really matter, right? So what I did was try the best I could, and I talked to Pastor Coates about not knowing I'd be the pastor. I felt like I would be, but I didn't know that. But I talked to him about every brick, every member. We'd sit for hours, and I would just soak it up. And so I didn't make a lot of changes. And even after becoming senior pastor, it was 5 years before I was the pastor. I mean, I was called the pastor. I had the study, I had a parking spot, and I got a check. But before you have the influence where someone leans on you and has an identity as a pastor, because a pastor must serve. And I can put you in an office and I can honor the office, but I don't honor you as my pastor until we have an encounter, we have an event, we have a situation. So it was assimilation, and know that God has a vision for you. And just, you got to have the courage. It takes courage to make a change. But if you make the change the right way, you can't mitigate all risk. You can't guarantee it's going to work. Pastor Coates gave me a piece of advice, Pastor. He said, I asked him, I said, when you did this in the ministry, you made this change. This is a fundamental change. And it's boss. We win because of this one change. It's amazing. How did you make it? How did you get there? How'd you have the courage? He said, son, listen, I didn't know it would work. I didn't know it was right. I just knew what we were doing was wrong. So he had to make, sometimes you got, I don't know if this is going to be right. I'm going to pray about it, and I'm going to have my best intention, but I know this is wrong. We got to fix this. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of take that approach. And so now there are things that others might come in and say, you need to fix that. And I'm like, well, if I fix it, it has this collateral damage. If I leave it as it is, it doesn't bother anybody, and we can grow around it. Sometimes I give people time and then grow around things. Other times, if it's harmful, we've got to make a change. We have to stop. And so that's how that worked for me.
Well, that's rich right there, especially when you say, learn where you are and honor what was there before you got there. Because if you're not careful, you say you can do too much too quick, and it can cause.
Well, just think about this. When we got on the call before we went live, I noticed your Michigan gear. Now, I know you as an Oklahoma State fan. This is why I pray for you regularly. I understand. But that's how I know you represent. You come hard. You don't pull no punches. You pick on people. I mean, you kind of represent that. Now, I understand why it's a challenge today in Michigan, since they're going to the, that's better. That's a better place to represent. I get it. But if I had come in and said, I can't believe you wearing Michigan stuff. You just sold OSU out. And you said, I didn't do that. I just said, what's up with Michigan? You said, well, it's my dad's team. And so now it means something to you. So if I come in and dog out your Michigan gear, not knowing it's a representation of your daddy, I just offended you and hurt you. And when all it took was a simple question.
Right.
Because I could have said, no, you're just a bandwagon person and you don't want to go with your team right now because your team is where my team is, going to some bowl we don't know the name of. And so we're going to pick a winner. And I could, that could, but we, as we laugh, we do that in church. I don't know why they do that. Well, you don't know that they used to have to lock up their equipment and keep it out the rain. You don't know what they've been through. So sometimes you got to consider what people paid, the price they paid before they ever got to you.
You talking real good. You know that, right?
Man, I'm just saying.
But now for those who are watching while Pastor Payne is getting on me, like I said, we have a good relationship. But he's getting on me for my Oklahoma State affiliation because he's an OU.
Boomer, soon. I got a hoodie right there. Boomer, so I'll put it on for you. I got to go get it right now and put it on. But I came neutral because I don't want to disrespect you. You
know what? Okay, but yes, I'm glad you did. But yes, he's an OU fan, so that's why he talked about this orange. But I did this orange specifically for him, just because I know of his OU affiliation, and I knew. And before we got on, he brought this to my attention, but I did it on purpose, just for him.
My name in orange, really?
Yeah, I did it just for you.
Yeah, well, I'm about to mess you up. See what the devil meant for evil, the Lord means for good. I'm gonna help you. I am actually a graduate of Midwest City High School, and I'm a state champion football player.
Okay.
And my quarterback, when I was state champion football,
It was Mike Gundy.
It was Mike Gundy. That's right. So unlike others, I'm not an OSU hater, but do understand that Pastor Coates is an OSU lover. So we battle every year. There's a picture of me in an OSU t-shirt. My skin still itches, but it was for Pastor Coates. So
it's okay. These things happen. These things happen. But these things happen. But as we transition, and as you talking about leadership, how important is it for the pastor to make sure that they are educated from seminary education, but also just reading books?
Listen, I grew up in a time where everybody didn't go to seminary and all of that. So, but when it comes to education, there's two questions here. One is leadership. The church will never grow beyond its leader.
Yes, sir.
So I don't care how the people that you have on your leadership team, they are capped at your leadership lid.
Wow.
So they can be better leaders than you, but if you're a poor leader, you won't take advantage of them. So they're going to be capped.
Wow.
So the church or the organization is going to only go as far as the leader.
Yes, sir.
So one of my mentors is John Maxwell. He says everything rises and falls on leadership. So when we talk about leadership, it's the ability to influence, nothing more, nothing less. And so if you think about pastoring from 30 years ago or 40 years ago or even 50 years ago, a pastor had to be able to preach. That he had to be able to preach to a couple other things, go do some visits. That's all he had to do. Well, now a pastor has to figure out a social media strategy, be a CEO, a CFO, a CIO, HR, all these different things. So that requires education. While you don't have to go get a formal education, you do have to be educated. So you have to read books, you have to do study, you have to do research. Everything's not a gut feel. Like I tell you, I'm a process guy, and I've authored 3 books. One's not published yet, but it's on the way. It's coming soon. But the first 2 books are on a process about how to increase your faith, because we grew up saying, turn it over to Jesus. Well, turn it over to Jesus when you were a slave and you were in bonds, and it meant I'm desperate, I have nothing else. It meant something to you. Turn it over to Jesus in your generation means, what do I do? Take a piece of paper, flip it over. What does that mean? So you got to communicate at every level, and the vision must be clear. And so leadership principles and these things are critical. Now, every pastor has to be a leader who understands his limitations, his strengths, his weaknesses, and be willing to augment or add or leverage someone else's strengths. But that comes from leadership as well. So how important is leadership? It's my life, because successful families have good leaders. Successful businesses have good leaders.
Yes, sir.
Successful ministries have good leaders. That's why you have some leaders, some churches. Let's just be real for a minute. We got some churches that have leaders who are so strong, but the leader, the pastor, can't really preach all that well. He's effective, but he can't really preach, but he's an awesome leader. At other churches, we got a pastor to preach you up and down the aisle around the pews, but can't lead. So leadership is critical, and leadership development and growth. What are you reading is the key. And a matter of fact, my current book is called A New Kind of Diversity by Tim Elmore. I'm focusing on how in the natural, not the spiritual, in the natural, how the various generations connect, the boomers to the busters, to the millennials, to the Yers and Xers and Zers. How does this work? And how do you all see things? How do we see things, so that I can communicate better? So leadership is critical.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I was just about to ask, for you, this is for you. How do you approach, whether it's preaching and teaching, making it applicable to all generations?
I try to stay connected to all generations. I get a pass on the older generation. I was raised by older people, so I get a pass. I know them. I'm in my generation, and so I know how my generation thinks, but I typically think more like the older generation, because that's how I was raised. I can go down to your age because of my kids, and then I rely on my kids to take me down from there.
Right.
So when I say social media, I'm gonna give you a few platforms, and everybody gonna know them. Them other ones y'all do, I don't know about all that stuff. I got you. I got YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok. Okay, I'm done. I'm out. It's all other Twitch. It's all kind. We stream on a platform I ain't never been on. My services go out to Twitch. I don't even know what Twitch is. I thought Twitch was a reaction when your skin. I don't know. Whatever. See, I mean, I stay connected, man, to people who can help me get there.
And you know that, but that's true, because in order to reach every generation, you do have to know where every generation is. And I've had, having conversations with especially my generation and younger, that's what really got me on TikTok, is because that's where they are. Like that TikTok is like the new social media go-to now. And it's like, if you're not on TikTok, or if you're not using it in some capacity, you're kind of behind the 8 ball a little bit, because yes, Facebook is still good. But the generation that's younger than me is TikTok, is Instagram, and it's still Snapchat. That's just what they use. So it's like,
man, do you realize that in my generation, it would take us 3 or 4 minutes to say, I'd like to give an honor to God, who is the head of and go blah, 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 blah. On TikTok, in 15 seconds, you've given a message with 3 points.
Absolutely.
And you all are processing that. Well, I want to get, so you have to be, as a leader, I don't have to be in that regard, but I do have to come out and be relevant.
Right.
The word stands on its own. But if you will not hear me, I can't get. How shall they hear without a preacher? I believe that God's going to give us a preacher in every generation that can reach back and forth. And what we know by research is that your key area of influence is plus or minus 7.
Mm-hmm.
If you expand it to the ends, you can go plus or minus 20.
Right.
So if you're 50, you're going to lose touch with 20-year-olds. And you won't understand 80-year-olds, but you can kind of hit that middle spot. So as a leader, I got to have somebody that can connect. I can connect to within the generation, who can then connect to the next generation. Right. And then I'm pouring in all of them. And one of the things I'll say generationally, and you'll get this, there are things that young people do that old people call disrespectful, and young people call it normal. It's just how it is. My kids still call they're adults. They have careers. They own homes. And they still call people Mr. and Mrs., sir and ma'am. They don't call grown people by their first name.
But
now it's no big deal.
Yeah.
It's no big deal. And so I have to learn not to be offended, because the reason I would be offended is because I would feel like you were trying to be disrespectful when you weren't being disrespectful. In your mind, you were just communicating.
Hey, you're right. Like my generation, we grew up on that, but now, for example, now somebody could see you, and they may not know you, but they may say, oh, what's up, OG? They may just call you.
That's who I am. I'm the OG now. Who knew that? So I had one of my preachers. I had a younger guy come to me, and he says, "What up, dude?" Talking to me. And one of my preachers came unglued. Pastor, you have to let me talk to him. You are not a dude. You are the pastor. I'm like, oh, he just said, what up? No, he needs to know. Mm-hmm. Well, we spend more time fighting on who he needs to know is what the Bible says. Let's go on and get over that. He wasn't saying that. But it's hard when you come that way, because my grandfather, until he died, if he called my name, my response was, sir, yes, sir.
Right.
Sir. I mean, to even gain my attention. He didn't have to give an instruction. We gave an instruction. Then I said, yes, sir. And went and did it, whatever it was.
Right.
It's different. That's the key to generations.
Absolutely. And so talk to us then, how was it for you? Because like I said, Bethlehem Star, I like I told you in private, I say in public, Bethlehem Star has done a fantastic job with the renovations to the church and the different ministries that go on at Bethlehem Star. But how was it navigating through the pandemic for you specifically, just preaching and teaching, just leading the congregation through the pandemic?
You should just hand me the razor blade, let me cut myself. No. So here's the thing. We were already online giving, we were already streaming, and we had been doing so since about 2007, 2008, somewhere in there. We had already been doing that. It wasn't up to snuff, it wasn't up to par, but we were doing that. When the pandemic comes in and we shut down, I have a great service the week before. I'm over at Mount Olive, man. We had church. Oh, I mean, shouting. And the next thing you know, the next Sunday, we're done.
Right.
We're finished. And so my first sermon was in my office at my house. No green screen, no real technology, spotty, choppy, buffering, the whole 9 yards. And so I told our leaders, when I called everyone together and said, we're going to have to shut the church down, I said this can be our finest hour of leadership in this moment. And so we had to, and I told them that day, this is how sure of a leader I was. The only thing I can tell you is that for however long, our leadership will be fluid. What that means is we may do it today and never do it again, or we may do it from now on, but we're going to be able to pivot, and whatever comes, we're going to deal with it. There were too many unknowns. Mm-hmm. I quickly learned that we're going to have to be streaming. So if we're going to have ministry, we got to do everything online. So we went everything online. I'm a church boy, couldn't take that. So I came back to church and said, if you want to come by, I'm here. But my church became basically a big studio. And I preached in a room or a classroom and had a green screen behind me. And then we went out into the sanctuary and we had live, we would record spots in there. So they would play the music pre-recorded, and then I would come in and preach under it, all produced. It looked wonderful, but it lacked that connection. So I kept growing and brought everybody in. So at the end of the day, we just kept improving our process. And so about 2 years ago, I started using the terminology that we are a hybrid church. Yeah. So whatever we do in person, whenever possible, we're going to do it online. And so in order to do that, we got to make some upgrades, got to system upgrades, some equipment, some capacity, some speed, some clarity. All these things have to happen. Audio, everything has to happen. So we started moving toward that, and we're still working through it, and God's blessing us to make it. But that was the deal, was that, so now my fulfillment hour classes, which is Sunday school for most people, they are better attended than ever in the history of the church. We have people from Germany, from Japan, from all over the country, from Georgia, Florida, Texas, all over the country coming to Bible study in those various rooms. They're still segregated. They're small groups. So we have to be fluid. And so whatever it takes to get the word out, that's what we're going to do.
And we are in this generation now. We are in like me and my father in the ministry, we always talk about it. We are in a 2-church generation. You do have your in-person church, but you also do have your virtual church. I mean, because we have these two different generations, and there are those who may not be at church, but they can still watch. We're still doing Bible study. It's so many things.
Yeah, I'm in the place now where we've got some different kind of virtual members. Mm-hmm. We got some who have virtual service on while they cooking dinner. They kind of halfway listening. We got some who are driving and not paying attention. We got some who treat it like church. They sit down. So my push now is be virtual if you need to be virtual, but be connected. Right. Connected means that you are engaged. You're in the chat. You're in, you talking about it. You pumping it up. You're staying connected during the week. You're coming into a Bible study room. And so that's my quest now, is to get us, because you can drive by and order whatever kind of service you want. If you can't find a church to make you happy now, you're just not looking. It's something out there, but how can you be connected and be assigned? So I'll always be a proponent of in-person. We are a communal people and need each other, but I'm committed to all things to all men, that by any means I might save some.
and it's true. We should never forsake the assembly of each other, but we also are in this culture, in this generation, where sometimes a person will rather watch church online than go to brunch right afterward, or find watch church online, or then go to a basketball game, go to a concert, or if they're flying out on Sunday, they'll pull up church. And
I have a member who could not make it to church.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't be able to ever again. Their church experience would have ended 5 or 6 years ago. But now they're in our Sunday school class every Sunday. They're in church every Sunday because we have the ability to stream. So I ain't hating on nobody. Get it your way. My goal is, if you're going to worship at home, I want to send you such a strong worship experience that it permeates your house and changes the atmosphere, and it makes you want to be in the building. If you're in the building, I want to make it so fire you don't want to leave the building. So I'm trying to get you wherever you are as best we can.
And you also helped me when you talked about sharing sermon notes. How has that been effective?
I've done it from day one. My team doesn't know anything else. They expect. So the idea behind it is, I'm going to give you notes, and I'm going to give you a few blanks, just a few, that you fill in. The goal is that I'm pre-filling the primary point with the goal of you writing the extra. It's the extra you write that makes the difference. And now you have a course of study. You can go home and study. I'm going to give you, on our sermon notes, we're going to give you a daily scripture, a weekly prayer. So we're looking to bring unity to the church. We're looking to equip you. I'm an equipper. So if I talked about something that made sense to you, if you got, I leave one blank usually per line. And the lines of one is 3 per point. So it's 9 lines. So it's 9 things you got to write in the whole sermon. Then you write other things in. The goal is you're creating a resource for yourself, because we have to be educated. Go back and study and go back and look at it, because I can't preach all of it in these few minutes.
Absolutely, because that's something that's been inspiring to me, that I've said I want to really do, is just share those sermon notes. Because I just think that's another way to engage, another way to because in case somebody misses this point, misses that point, well, they can go back to the sermon note and highlight and do whatever they need to do in order to do that. So a couple of things, then Pastor Payne, I'm gonna get you out of here, because you've been so gracious with your time, especially with this being December, we're wrapping up. One thing Pastor Payne does that I love is that he is a leadership coach. He's very into leadership. He's written books, and he is on the team with Dr. John Maxwell. So just talk to us about your leadership journey.
Wow. First of all, the leadership journey that I'm on is a gift from God.
Because I take notes all the time,
Yeah. God gifted me in the area of leadership and gave me influence with people from a very early age. I've had a big mouth since my mama said I was talking when I was born. So I've been talking my whole life. It wasn't until the early 2000s that I was introduced to, at another level. I'm already preaching and all that stuff, but I got introduced to another level, to spiritual gifts in the Bible and understanding how they are. Understand how they work. And then I began to really understand leadership. So there are many things that I've done, I would say intuitively in the natural, that I just do. Well, what they are is they're a manifestation of the gifts God has given me in the area of leadership. But when he revealed to me that you are spiritually gifted to lead, just because you're gifted doesn't mean you're prepared. Going back to the education point you said. So that's when I began to really dig into and read everything I get my hands on. I became a member of John Maxwell's organization back in 2018, but the very first leadership material I taught my church was I went to Mardell's and bought a kit, and I played the video and did the fill in the blanks with my team. And I didn't have a strong enough voice. I was too young, and they were going for 31-year leaders. So I would borrow Maxwell's voice, and then I would make it applicable to us. And so from that I just began so I spend 3 or 4 weeks per year at some type of leadership development situation. And I pour into myself all the time in that area. And so that's how I kind of got started. God says a gift. I gave it to you, but it's up to you to spend the time to develop it. It's up to me to determine how far and how wide your reach becomes. It's up to you to determine how deep you go. And so since that time, I've been excavating everything I could on leadership and consuming content and developing my own voice. And so and what that looks like. And so all the principles that you hear, the various tentacles that have poured into me to bring me to where I am today, it showed me how much further I have to go, obviously. But I get here, and now God begins to show me, when you were doing this was actually what it was. And this is the education, academia behind it. This is the spirit behind it. This is how you use it to bless somebody else. And so I've dedicated my life to developing leaders and helping leaders to grow. That's what and obviously in our church, again, Praise Beyond the Walls is a leadership initiative. It's not a Rodney Payne initiative. It's being blessed with some great leaders that God has revealed his talents in them, shown them to me. Collaboration comes forth, and then God gets the glory.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, tell us about the books that you've written.
I've got 3. And the first one is called 90 Days of Believing God. It's a 90-day book. It comes from 3 perspectives. It's to believe God personally, to believe God purposefully, and to believe God positionally. Personally, you don't get to believe God without a relationship. Your purposefully is why you're believing him, not just for a new car, but why. And positionally is you always believe God from a place of submission, not a place of authority. You're not in charge. God is. And so that's the first book. The second book is a devotional that attaches to that and takes you through 13 weeks of a devotional in those 3 categories to help you to grow in your faith. The objective is that if I spend this time, I understand better how to have this faith in God and how to leverage that. This will help me. And there's some real life instances of supernatural miracles that took place but watching how God works through everyday process and disciplines as well. And the newest book, I'm super excited about this. It's called Critical Decisions Made Easy. It's my first leadership book. It's leadership only. So it's going to take you on a journey of how to make effective decisions. And you heard me talk a lot about gut feel. There are every great leader is a great decision maker. The problem is most people don't have a decision-making process. It's more of a gut feel. I feel it. And so sometimes you can't count on that feeling to be right. So I'm going to teach you how to build a process that helps you to be consistent and make the best decision possible. Some things that people don't know about decision making, sometimes there is no good decision. There's only the best decision, meaning that whatever I do is going to have a bad outcome, but it has a better bad outcome if I make the best possible decision. Sometimes our options are limited. Sometimes we'd like to check the other box when the other box is not an option. So how do we make decisions that we are confident in, we can believe in, and we can reproduce this process to make good decisions? So that it's in print, it's in the publisher and people, they have it now. My website, rodneyrpayne.com, you can pre-order it, but that's what I'm so ready to do that. I'm excited about that.
Well, thank you, Pastor Payne. Is there anything else that's on your heart you want to share, you want to say?
I just want to celebrate you, man, your success. I'm watching you, and I told you one of the things that today we talked about was that finishing your assignment. I watched how you left your last assignment, and you may not even know how you said it, but basically you said, I have finished my assignment. You wouldn't say where you were going or what was next. You said that we finished what we were supposed to do here. And then you came out and said, now God has assigned us here. And so the way you walk and the way you honor Dr. Brian and others, that is amazing and beautiful. And it's to be valued by your peers. That makes you a contemporary of your peers, because you've published books, you preach like you're never gonna get to preach again every time you get to preach. And that's how I approach it. I approach preaching like it's the bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, bases loaded. I gotta get a hit. Full count. I gotta go. I gotta get a hit. Striking out is not an option. And that's how you approach your ministry. And so how you honor those who have led you, and obviously how you honor your wife and your mom and the whole 9 yards. I love that about you. And so I'm just glad to get a chance to hang out with you. And I appreciate what you do for others, man. So I just want to celebrate you.
Man, I appreciate that. Also, Pastor, tell the people about Bethlehem Star, if they're ever in Oklahoma City, where they can come.
Bethlehem Star Baptist Church, where we live in the love of God, walk in the will of God, and experience the power of God. We equip the body of Christ through evangelism, discipleship, and Christian service, meeting the needs of the whole person. We meet at 2704 Northeast 24th, right here in Oklahoma City. bsbcokc.org is our website. We stream live on almost everything, and we have 2 services on Sundays. 8 is in-person only. 10:45 is our stream service. 9:15 we have fulfillment hour. We have 3 services on Wednesday. We have 11 o'clock Bible study that's Zoom. Have a 7 p.m. global Bible study that's hybrid. And we have an 8 p.m. young adult in-person Bible study that I'm privileged to teach. I have a leader who leads it. I teach the lesson. And so we're doing whatever we can to meet the needs. So if you're in the Oklahoma City area, look us up and we'll have a good time.
Absolutely. Well, thank y'all for joining. I'm going to ask Pastor Payne to stay on just for a couple minutes after we close this, but thank you all for joining us for another Clergy Conversation. We definitely ask you to like, comment, and share, and spread the word. And if you're ever in the Oklahoma City area, you could definitely go join worship and fellowship with the Bethlehem Star Baptist Church in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. So God bless you and God keep you. Y'all have a good afternoon.